Hello, everybody. Welcome to Player 2 Press Start. I am killagreg. You can find me at killagreg17.
And I'm Dan. You can find me at the Polygon1. And joining us today is Alex from Agree or Die.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back again.
Of course. You can also find us at Player2, PLAYRTWO, or player2pressstart.com. I messed it up, Dan. I'm sorry.
Oh, you stepped all over it.
I stepped on your line.
And Alex, where can we find you on the internet?
Agreeordie.com. Just go there.
All right.
So today we are concluding our conversation on the Mass Effect trilogy. We are going to be talking about Mass Effect 3 today, and then at the end we will have a brief wrap-up of the entire series. Did you have something to say, Dan?
I was going to do the intro, but you've covered it marvelously. So
Yes.
Please forge ahead.
So going ahead, let's first talk about the differences between this game and... do we want to do differences between each one or just the series in general? Every game is so distinct in its feel, its gameplay, that you can't. It's not like, oh, 1 and 2 were like this, and then 3 was like this. 1 had its own thing, 2 had its own thing, and now 3 has its own thing.
I think let's compare it to 2, if anything.
I would agree with that. 2 is definitely the dark horse of this series, both in story and gameplay. 2 was very actiony, whereas I feel like 1 and 3 are definitely a little bit closer in gameplay tone.
Yeah, Yeah, I'd agree. Well, yeah, you're right. As far as the amount of action, I think 2 had the most.
I
3's
don't know if I agree.
3's close.
I don't think I agree with that.
Okay.
What do you think, Dan?
I think 1 had moments of sort of like epic action story. Like, for example, the first mission you start on is sort of like a big mission. You don't know what's going on, and what's his name? The bad guy. What's his name?
Soren? Saren?
Saren. Yeah. You know, and like Saren's big mystery, and like that. I remember that first mission being a bit on the epic side. And they sort of throw you into it. But 2, I'll definitely give you. That's a very action-packed game. It's very focused, and it's tight with the gameplay, almost to a detriment, as we discussed last episode. You know, there are varying opinions on it, but you know, I think it's a valid observation. And 3, it feels a little bit more in the middle between the 2 to me. I think 3 has a lot of those sort of epic moments. Like, for example, when you're on the I'm forgetting all the names of stuff now. I haven't played in a long. What's Garrus's species?
Taurians.
Turians, yeah. When you're on that moon and you're trying to like defend their homeworld and everything's like going crazy, that was like a super action-packed level. And I remember that one like distinctly. Like that was real intense. That was like a war zone. Yeah. And that one seemed pretty intense. But on the other hand, you know, there's other moments which are, you know, not quite as intense. I think it's somewhere in the middle. I always felt like 3 in a lot of different aspects of these games, like any category that you could judge these games on. I feel like 1 was on one side of the spectrum, 2 was on the other, and then 3 was sort of a happy medium for most aspects of it, and they sort of settled on that. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but I felt like 3 was sort of the midpoint.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. 3 is hard because it had so much like exposition. So there was a lot of talking and a lot of slower parts where you're discussing the nature of, you know, life. And then there was, of course, the action. And the action in 3 is better, mostly because they added the role. And the role really made the action feel more like... The action felt more action-y. And so there was maybe less of it, but it was more intense when it was there because you're running around more and diving under cover, and it's more like active, more mobile.
I do feel like 3 did get sort of a happy medium in the series. There was a lot of issues with 1, and I thought they got rid of all those issues in 2 by just eliminating huge swaths of the game. And I feel like in 3 they sort of came back to the middle. It was like the two extremes. They started here, they shot way over here, and then eventually sort of found their way back to where they began with this series. But they retained all the good parts of 2. Like I don't think a shift more towards action is a bad thing for the Mass Effect series. 2 did that great. So it's nice that that's the thing they kept out of Mass Effect 2, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But they went back in a lot of things.
So before we get too far ahead, can we just give a brief synopsis of this game and where we are in the series for people that might not be as familiar with it, but want to come along with our conversation?
Do it, Dan.
All right. So in Mass Effect 1, we're introduced to the Reapers, sort of an extragalactic, sentient, robotic, alien species sort of thing. And increasingly through 1 and 2, we realize that they're hellbent on annihilating pretty much all of the other sentient races in the Milky Way. And in 3, that comes to a head when the final war between the Reapers and the sort of allied species that exist, the war finally begins and ultimately ends.
Maybe.
And one of the which we'll discuss, but I think one of the biggest aspects of this series is choice, and like what characters you have, who you fall in love with, the decisions you make on your missions, all of that stuff. It's super important, or it seems like it'll be, and that sort of becomes a major issue in the 3rd game, and I think later on in this discussion we'll touch on that. That's, I think, one of the defining characteristics of this whole series is choice. I mean, it's an RPG with action elements, and it definitely has both of those. So should we talk about the choice issues now, or do you want to save that for later?
Let's talk about it. We can talk about it now. Sure.
We can explain how it pertains to the end and how people are upset about the ending later. But for now, I mean, it's fine talking about the different choices in the game.
Okay. So like here's a really great example of one. In the first game, you have an opportunity to either annihilate the last remnants of this insectoid race known as the Rachni. They were a scourge on the galaxy, and they've been brought back. You have the choice to either destroy this last remnant or let them live. And I chose to let them live. Like I thought this was going to be like a huge decision, and I really thought about it carefully when I made it in the first game. And ultimately, it had a very minor outcome in the 3rd game, and I was pretty disappointed about that. So I felt like they set you up with these epic choices you had to make, and then ultimately there was no real delivery in their value.
Yeah, you're totally right, and those are one of my 2 big problems is the Rachni situation, which to say it was minor is an understatement. It made absolutely no difference.
Right.
The Rachni were still there. They made a clone queen who was the same as the other queen, and the mission played out exactly the same. It was horrible. And the other big mission, a big thing like that, is in Mass Effect 2, when you either save the collector base or destroy it on Elusive Man's request. He says we need to keep the collector base, or you can destroy it because it's ill-gotten gains, right? And then no matter how you do it, it's always nothing. It doesn't matter. It's still there. The background changes a bit in the when you're climbing in the Cerberus building or whatever. It's stupid, but one of the things people say, as if that ruins the whole choice. But the fact that you thought so hard about the choice originally, I think that's where, they definitely botched the conclusion of that arc. But the turmoil you felt when you made the decision, that's really where the gameplay is, and that choice is still important in your first playthrough. That choice is still very powerful, and I think that people forget that when it's ruined at the end. That it was a difficult choice to make, and you made it based on a lot of thinking, and that is still important.
Right.
It's kind of like if you have a really good TV series and 5 seasons are great, and then they botch the series finale. It doesn't mean the whole show is garbage.
Yeah.
or Dexter. Um,
Yes.
So in Mass Effect 3, you've made all these decisions, and you continue to make more in the third game, which lead to, I don't remember what they call them. They're like battle points or something. What do they call them?
Yeah, readiness.
War readiness.
Readiness.
Yeah. And you had to reach a threshold, right? There was like a minimum, and if you had more than that, you were better off. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, it's really stupid. Yeah, if you didn't reach the minimum, then you can only choose one of the three endings at the end. And if you reach a certain amount, you can do two of the endings. And only if you reach like the maximum could you see all three endings.
And so, for example, like feeding into that, saving the Rachni Queen gives you some readiness points, and that gives you, so it raises that level just a little bit higher.
Right.
But when you save the Rachni Queen, you kind of think, wow, is this this could go super south, and they could just be a scourge across the entire galaxy again, or are they gonna like save me completely in the last game? Are they gonna come back and be like a true ally?
Right.
But it just ends up being like, oh, you've got a couple more points, big deal.
And
Yeah.
it turns like an important decision early on into basically just a stat, like on an accounting book at the end. And
Yeah.
that's where the real disappointment is. It's not even that. I feel like if they had even just ignored it, that would have been better than a like brief stupid cutscene and a plus 75 on your war readiness. And that you kind of, in a series this large where they took so much into account, you expect that in like that final battle or something, you're going to see the Rachni like fighting alongside or doing something, and instead it's just not. There's like virtually no payoff for that.
Yeah.
But I will say that while they did ignore certain things like the collector base and the Rachni, so you forget how many little choices you made throughout the game that do come to fruition by the third one. Even as simple as, Caden and Ashley, like they're still kicking around, they're still doing stuff. Rex, whether you shot Rex or not, stuff like that. I was reading a synopsis of Mass Effect 3 on Wikipedia today, and every single plot line was like, at this point you have this conversation with so-and-so, and then in parentheses they have to write, or this person if, that person didn't survive the suicide mission, or that person didn't survive Vermeer. And what makes it so interesting is that the game I'm playing could be 100% different than the game the person next to me is playing. So when people sort of complained about the absence of your decisions making an impact in this game, it always sort of annoyed me because I think they just sort of forget how many decisions they've made over the years.
Well, it's because they focused on the little decisions and forgot to address the big ones. Like that Rachni decision was probably like the most important thing you did in Mass Effect 1, other than winning the game. Like that was the biggest thing. You fought through a bunch of Rachni, you found the Queen, it was amazing, and then you make this hard decision, which, you couldn't radio back. Then the Council, no matter which way you made it, the Council berates you for it, and you're always like second-guessing yourself the entire time. I mean, that was a huge focus of that game. And then it comes back in this game, and it's like they just forgot to write it in. And they're like, oh shit, due date's tomorrow, what are we going to do? Oh, clone. And they put in some Arachnite Queen clone, and they just write it off. Like that wasn't even anything, it didn't matter at all. So it's, it's too bad. And you're right, there's a lot of shit they did where, it's like, here's something, this is a guy you don't even remember, but he's here, and like if you follow him back, you're like, this is really cool.
Right.
But I wish
So
they spent time with the
I have a quick story question for you guys, sort of an opinion thing. So in the first game, Shepard, he's working for the Alliance. He's a soldier. He's an officer. Is he an officer? He's got to be an officer. Yeah, that's a stupid question. He's a captain. And then in the second one, he's sort of like this rogue sort of character working outside of the government, outside of the military, working for some sort of shadow organization. Then in the third one, he comes back, and he's sort of back in his old shoes, in his old position, doing the same thing he was doing. From both, like, a convenient storytelling point of view and also from just, like, your general feeling about it, how do you guys feel about that? Like, that sort of flip-flopping, going back and forth. And there being essentially no ramifications for the fact that, he's this weird clone, and he was working for Cerberus, and all this terrible thing. Like even destroying the Batarians. Like there was pretty much no fallout for that. There was a little bit at the beginning of the game, but that's pretty much it.
Well, I mean, he was court-martialed and he was in detention for that. Well, I mean, what else could they're going to execute him? I mean, what do you mean, shrug? That's what they put you in jail. So he was in jail.
That's like genocide.
Well, yeah, but it was a military. Like what they say, killing one makes you a murderer, killing many makes you a war hero. It's like it wasn't like he went out and killed a bunch of Batarians. It was a militaristic action that he did, and he got court-martialed for it. But they don't execute you for that. Well, maybe they could, but the thing is, the high command knew what Shepard was doing, so.
I wonder though. So it was a tactical decision. He wanted to get rid of the
relay.
Yeah, the relay there. I wonder how much difference would that have really made? The Reapers spread across the entire Milky Way. They completely attacked Earth. I mean, would the Batarians would it have been better to just keep them around and have them as allies?
The Reapers would have attacked that day rather than 2 years later, is what would have happened.
Okay. Well.
So what happened is the Reapers had to take the long road. They had to walk instead of teleporting, essentially. So Shepard saved the galaxy by 2 years and gave him time to hopefully prepare, but they didn't prepare at all, which is kind of part of the story.
2 years to continue to ignore him.
Yeah, I'm saying 2 years. I might be wrong, but it's at least a year, right? Some time passed.
It's got to be. Let's see if I can find out here.
But then when he was I think he did get a lot of flack. When the Shepard or Ashley in Mass Effect 2, when they ran into him being on Cerberus' side, that was quite a bit of an emotional flack kind of a piece where I can't believe you, blah blah blah. But the whole time, Anderson knew what Shepard was doing, and Anderson knew he was still the same Shepard. And then when Mass Effect 3 rolls around, then Anderson just re-empowers him again and says you're back because he's in command, and it's kind of a military rule kind of a thing once the Earth starts getting attacked. So I think I wasn't bothered by that at all, if that's the question.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Just curious how you guys felt about sort of the sort of loyalty flip-flopping that was going on and the jumping around.
Yeah, well, I mean, Shepard never changed loyalty. He just kind of did what he needed to do.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Unless you're switching alignments, then maybe you can get weird. If you were a hardcore renegade with Cerberus and then became a Paragon with the Alliance, it kind of can get a little muddy what you're up to, but most players didn't do that, I don't think.
Were there any missions in Mass Effect 2 where you, as a Cerberus agent, have to fight the Alliance?
No.
That would have been an interesting mission because your loyalties would have really been tested.
Yeah, that would have been cool. Then you would have needed to have a way to opt out of the mission somehow. But that would have been for sure interesting.
Mass Effect 3 takes place 6 months after the Arrival DLC.
6 months, huh? That's it? Well,
hey, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, it is. So okay, well let's get a little nitty gritty and talk about what we liked about the gameplay or what we didn't like. I mentioned rolling before. I absolutely loved rolling.
That was huge. That was my biggest complaint about the gameplay in 2. So the addition here is massive.
Playing 3 a lot and then going back to play 1 or 2, you feel like you're controlling some kind of a stupid stone statue that can hardly move. When you're coming from rolling nonstop to this idiot who can kind of jog and then take cover really bluntly. Yeah, that's a huge boost with the roll.
As someone that plays a lot of first-person shooters, less so playing third-person shooters, I get real frustrated when I'm forced to play a character that's kind of sluggish. And I never enjoyed playing any of the Tomb Raider games because Lara Croft always felt like she was really, or Resident Evil, because the characters felt like they were so wooden and hard to control and had no dexterity, and that always really bothered me. So I was really happy in Mass Effect 3 when they continued to improve on that and make your character that much more agile.
You're going to have a real good time playing Gears of War.
I've played it before. I'll be fine.
They're like battle tanks of men.
Yeah. So then we also got grenades, which I mean, grenades were in Mass Effect 1, but they were really, like, the most awkward thing. A lot of people didn't even know they were there. And they
Because
was like,
they were mapped to the back button in
yeah,
Mass Effect
what the
1.
hell? And then the way they even worked, like, they had no gravity to them. You threw them in a
Yeah.
straight line, and then you had to, like, push it again to blow them up. And if you threw them at an enemy, it wasn't really clear if it hit the enemy or went through them. You had no idea what the hell you were doing with them. It was stupid.
And they were numbered, right? Like you had a certain amount.
Right, they were an item. Yep.
Does that change in 3? Is it, or do they just like, does it have a cooldown?
No, in 3 they're also numbered, and you pick them up
Okay.
from ammo packs.
Okay.
And I guess grenades were in 2 as well. They had Inferno grenades and flashbangs, and they were on cooldown in 2.
I don't know if I've ever used grenades in 2 or 3.
Yeah, in 3 they're great. I love them.
Hmm.
They're fun, especially the frag ones, which act like grenades act, and you can like roll them on the ground and bounce them off walls, and really feel like you're being a tactical fighter. I love that.
Really, I had no idea.
Yeah. So the big boost there, love it. There's so many guns in this game. They added so many guns, and they added a bunch of attachments to the guns, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I really love the gun selection too. We'll talk about the multiplayer a little bit later, but that ability to have so many different guns that really fit your playstyle was crucial to me in the multiplayer.
Yeah, for sure. And any class can now use any gun, so that's really great because you're really stuck. Like if you're an adept, you're pistols only all game and SMGs, and it kind of sucks. And in this game, you can just carry all 5 guns, and the penalty will be to how fast you can use your powers. But that's a cool trade-off where you can be kind of a heavy adept, using sniper rifles and giant machine guns.
Yeah, I like that.
It's neat.
I really liked that mechanism where the more weapons you're carrying, the slower your cooldown is, and I thought that was it hinders you as a player, but I really liked the inclusion of that feature. I thought it added a lot of texture to the game.
Yeah, it's a very clever game mechanic, and that sort of mechanics is narrative, which is an interesting idea in general.
And it kind of lets you choose about what's more important to you, having guns, having different weapons, and being able to mix it up based on your circumstances, or relying more on your powers. Like when I did multiplayer, I almost always carried the minimum. I carried like 1 gun, 1 or 2, but almost always 1, so I'd have the maximum cooldown because I relied more on my powers when I was doing multiplayer and was content. And a lot of the maps are relatively small for the most part, so I could get away with it. But I really enjoyed that. I liked having that choice, that being able to make that decision myself.
I really love the powers in this game too. It was my biggest complaint about 1 was just how long it took for your powers to respawn, and then how inaccurate they were at the time. Using your powers in this game is a real joy. It's quick and intuitive, and you very rarely miss just because of the clumsy interface. And I use my powers more than I use guns, really. I'm mostly just spamming my left and right button to go back and forth between different powers, and then peppering with gunfire every now and then. And I like that it allows you to play that way if you want.
They added some stealth elements in this game. Well, they added 1 stealth element, and that is if you're crouching behind cover and an enemy comes near you, you can insta-kill them with a melee attack with this kind of like execution move. In single player, you do it very rarely. In multiplayer, you can pull it off more often. The melee attacks, they added like a really cool melee animation, which I think is very neat. And in single player, it doesn't really shine because you're just the one guy, but in multiplayer, they all have different ones, and it's really cool. But I'm happy they added something there, but I think they really undervalued the stealth part of it, because so many things have to go right. You got to be crouching. The enemies have to be not alerted, because they start running around. And then they got to come up to you and get themselves executed. I wish they sort of actually had some stealth mechanics so you can maybe sneak, and the enemies wouldn't they wouldn't automatically activate if you got in their area. They would just be patrolling, and you come up behind them and insta-kill them, so you can actually stealth through entire areas. That would have been not that hard to do, and they kind of thought about it, but then just dropped it. It was kind of weird.
It would have been nice if they could do that, but I'm glad that they didn't require it at any point. this game plays pretty well, but at the end of the day, the controls are still a little bit clunky. I was trying to check a computer terminal today, and like I was standing right in front of the terminal, but I was in like sort of an enclosed space, and I couldn't get Shepard and the camera to sort of like coordinate enough for him to look at the terminal to actually activate it. And I struggled. It didn't take me that long. It was maybe like 15 seconds. But when you're struggling to do something as simple as that, I'm really glad that they don't require you to do stealth elements. Like, the game is not precise enough, and stealth requires real precision.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I mean, they tried something. It's like they're kind of half-assing it. At this point, I wish they didn't even have what they did because it left me wanting, you know?
Right. I mean, I wouldn't have minded if they included that as part of it. Is like, hey, if you want to be a stealth, you go right ahead. But if they had put a stealth mission in this game, that would have ruined it. Like, that would be that, like, hill that most people didn't get over, I think.
Yeah, that'd be too weird.
Well, thankfully, the only real, I think, stealth mission that's really ever been in any of the games was the one with Kasumi, where you're sort of at that party at that rich guy's house. I mean, that's sort of stealth-ish. But thankfully, I mean, you guys you play as soldiers. Most of the people are beefed up and like ready for action, and not really designed for that kind. I mean, we're you know, sort of spec ops kind of people, like. For the most part.
I just picture Shepard like crouching around and that doofus Vega like lumbering between everything.
Don't bring Vega on your stealth missions.
All right. So Dan, you wanted to talk about the characters next. Is that right?
Yes, I do.
All right. What do you want to say?
So first of all, just a quick rundown. The playable characters in this game, assuming that you had not killed them in previous games, are Kaidan, Tali, Liara, Garrus, a new character, James Vega, Ashley Williams, Javik, and Edie. Edie was in 2, but not a playable character, but now she is. In a ridiculous, weirdo, hot robot body.
It doesn't make any sense.
No. It's like so ridiculous. So specifically, I'm interested in one, what you guys think about. They don't have quite as many characters in this one. A lot of people from previous games show up, and you have interactions with them. But your core group of people is a little bit smaller than in 2. They kind of went pretty large in 2, and then pared it back down for 3. And then my second question is, what did you think of Vega, James Vega? So those are my questions. Anybody feel free to answer it.
Okay, so
Jesus Christ.
I'm happy that they kind of lessened the amount of characters because I often felt overwhelmed in 2, and I couldn't bring anybody enough times. You know, I always felt like I was neglecting people, and I kind of like to spread the love. You know, so I was having a tough time. So in this one, it's nice to have a good amount of old people that you're cool with, and then a couple of new people. If Javik is included, I had Javik because he's a DLC character, so now everybody had him. Without Javik, you only have 2 new characters, so that is kind of sad. But with Javik, it's like 40-60% wise, so that's kind of cool. Excuse me.
Bless you. Yeah, I did not have Javik, so it was just the 6 to me. I think that's fine. I don't see any real if they're going to keep the party size to 3, it doesn't make that much sense to have a much larger party. You're just going to pick the 2 you like and take them with you. So by reducing it, it allows them to focus more on the characters that you can choose, so their dialogues can be more interesting. The time you spend with them can be more interesting. And I think that's important in this game's because in 2 it sort of felt a little bit rushed. You're just sort of like, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to do your mission, now we're friends, we're done. And you did that for all 1,200 of your characters. So now it's just I'm always a big proponent of focusing games, so I'm totally down with them just bringing it back to 6.
Did either of you guys ever have any of the core characters die in 2, like Garrus or Liara or Tali? I guess Liara can't die. Tali or only yeah. I didn't either. I never even played it that way, and I'm really curious what happened because Garrus is so pivotal in the first mission where you go on Palaven's moon and he's there, and then he joins you there and he talks a lot. And if he's not there, what is he, just some random Torian there instead? It sounds so weird. And
It's I was playing that part of the game today, and there's a really funny introduction of Garrus, where Vega's standing behind you, and Garrus walks up, and Shepard's like, "Vega, this is Garrus," and then there's this weird pause, and in my brain, the next line was, "He'll be taking your place for the rest of the game." Yeah, this actually brings up a different question I wanted to ask, is how much preparation did you go into these games with? Like, did you know that at the end of 2 there was a suicide mission, so you're like, I'm going to do my research, I'm going to make sure nobody dies, I'm going to do whatever I have to do? Or do you just play these games naturally and sort of see what happens?
I think that if the developers had it their way, everyone would play it naturally and see what happens. But the way the Mass Effect 2 is structured, if you beat the entire game, your chances of losing anybody in the last mission is pretty slim. You might lose one person if you make a bad choice on like who's leading what fire team, but I mean I've accidentally sometimes just like randomly picked and still got nobody die. You actually have to try pretty hard to get people killed, which is unfortunate because the only way to do it is really to essentially skip missions. But no one's buying their game to not play the missions. There's no point in that, So
Right.
I did. As the series went on, I increasingly did more and more preparation. And by that, I mean, if I got to a choice and I was concerned what the outcomes might be, I would look it up on the Mass Effect wiki and use it as somewhat of a walkthrough. Because I was worried that I would make a decision that I would be really frustrated and angry with later on. And too many times in games, I've made little decisions that I thought were little and then ended up really biting me in the ass. And that sort of attitude kind of started with Knights of the Old Republic. Yo, get socks for your dog, man. I sent you some sock links. What's going on with the dog socks? You got to get the dog socks.
He did mute himself. Oh, look at that cutie. I'm all right with the dog.
I don't really care. I just like harassing him about the dog socks. When Mass Effect 1 first started, I didn't really do any of that, and that was kind of my plan, was to just play the games, but I kept getting increasingly worried that I was going to like lose a character I really wanted, or I mean, at this point I knew there were some games, and I knew that things carried over from one to the next, so I kind of got worried that I would screw something up and be really angry about it later.
Yeah, for these types of game, I really do the maximum amount of research that I can. I really don't want to mess something up. And especially in Mass Effect 2, I mean, I did everything. It was like, what decisions do I have to make sure everyone survives? So for this game, I mean, I just did the maximum amount I could. It's like, all right, how much I want to make sure my war readiness number is an appropriate amount so that nobody dies at the end. I want to get the best ending. I don't want to have to play this twice and mess it up. And I don't know if that's the right way to play. Maybe there is no right or wrong way to play. But I was just curious if any of you had like a more natural approach to the game.
I beat it so many times that I just tried everything at that point. But I think, the naturally you're going to just try to play as much of the game as possible to get maximum value out of your playthrough. Unless you're more of a freak about it, and then you want to play it multiple times to really extract the maximum. Then you might intentionally start making weird choices. But the first time, you're really just going to play every mission. And the game is built in a way where if you play every mission, you're essentially going to like not miss out on any content, other than dialogue if you don't bring the right person, obviously. But
in Mass Effect 2, if you depending on when you do the suicide mission, or I think basically what happened in my situation was that I don't know if I took too much time to get to that point or what happened, but it basically came down to I could either go get Legion or I could start the suicide mission. And I feel like maybe I went just a little too far in the game, and that's what led me to that having to make that choice. And I made the choice to get Legion, and that ultimately meant that during the suicide mission I lost Chambers, the chick that reads you your email.
Yeah.
um, and like I was disappointed about that because I thought she was fine. I had no problems with her, and I didn't want to lose anybody that I didn't need to lose. And when I came up to a situation like that, like I didn't backtrack through saves or try and undo it. Like I would deal with the situation that has presented itself, and like I would try and prepare for things. But if I still effed it up, I would proceed anyway and make the best of the bad situation.
Yeah. I think that's one of the cooler choices because you didn't know that was going to happen. And then when it does happen, you don't know how long you have before something bad happens, you know?
Yeah, like I didn't straight up walk through the game. Like I didn't use a guide to do every step of it. I referenced it when I had a question, which I think is probably a much more balanced way to do it. I think if you just straight up use a walkthrough, that's kind of what's the point then? You're not even really playing it. You're just going through the motions. You're not making any choices. You're not making any decisions. Then at that point, you're just doing it for the action gameplay, and there's much better games to do that with.
That's true. And that's something I struggle with a lot, especially with RPGs in general. Like the Final Fantasies, I will go like word for word through a walkthrough and be like, okay, now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. And I don't know like what compels a person to do that or how like why I choose to do that. But I'm just always terrified of like missing the best thing in the game. It's like, oh, if I had done this 15 hours ago, now I'd have the best weapon and this would be great. But
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the structure of Final Fantasy games, though. Those games aren't, I mean, I've only played up through maybe 10. I haven't played anything beyond 10, but like they're not really role-playing games because you don't even make any decisions. All you
Right.
do is, where do I go next? What do I do when I get there? And there is a ton of secrets and a lot of opportunity for missing stuff. Like, for example, in Final Fantasy 3 or 6 on Super Nintendo, at the very beginning of the game, this guy asks you if you're ready for the mission, and you can say yes or no. And if you say no, he asks you the same question again, and you can say yes or no. And you have to say yes to proceed the game, right? But if you say no 4 times to the exact same dialogue box, then you get a special item that's really rare at the very beginning of the game that you like won't be able to get until way later in the game. So it's like, how would you ever know that? You would never know that. If anything, it's like you're just going to keep asking me until I say yes.
right.
4 times you got to say no. So you need a guide for that kind of nonsense, you know? In Mass Effect, there's no secrets. There's no hidden bosses. It's all, you can't really miss anything if you're just playing the game. And at the same time, you have to make a lot of choices that are personal. So a guide can't be like, make the renegade choice here because it's not about making the right choice. It's about making your choice, so.
Right.
Here's something that in a previous episode, Greg, we were talking about the space mining game that I was playing that I went like hardcore at for a brief period.
For like 5 days.
Yeah, I have not gotten back into it. It got a little too intense and I got burned a little too much. But the thing I really, really enjoyed about it, which is completely different than most of the games I play, is it had user-generated content, and it was open-ended, and there was no story that was unfolding that's sort of been pre-chosen, which is why I struggle a lot with games like Grand Theft Auto and role-playing games, because like I know there's a whole story that's already been chosen. Everything is pre-selected. And it's like I'm making choices, but I'm not really making choices because I know that an outcome already exists depending on what I choose. It's like I'm doing a choose your own adventure book and I'm flipping to see both options to see which one I think is better. But I almost prefer not having that and having it completely user generated and open-ended, because then I can just play it, and whatever decision I make, the outcome that happens is like completely spontaneous and original. And that's like if there was, I mean, there's no way to really do that right now with video games with something like Mass Effect. But if there was, that would be an incredible game. I would absolutely love it because I could just play it and immerse myself in it and make the choices and decisions I want to make, and just sort of deal with what comes, what the roll of the dice is that day.
All right, let's keep moving because we haven't even gotten to the second
Okay.
part of your question 25 minutes ago. James Vega, I have very little opinion of him.
Yeah, I never took him with me, but I appreciated when I talked to him, I liked him, and he was kind of like a young shepherd, sort of, but like, I wish he didn't look like such a goon.
Yeah, it looks like such a meathead.
Yeah, exactly. So like when I talked to him, I kind of felt like I was just talking to a stupid person, and not because he said anything stupid, because he just looks like all he does is work out all the time. You know, like, once he got time to work his brain out.
And this was like right at the height of Jersey Shore. So
Yeah.
like him being in that game at that time period was too much to like respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr., right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that the voice acting was really great. I thought like he seemed like a very realistic character in the game. He didn't strike me as like a caricature of somebody. And so I really enjoyed talking to him, and I thought he was interesting, and I wanted to know more about him. He looked absurd. They really should have done something with that and made him a little bit more down to earth. They really should have groomed him as a replacement for Shepard after the series, and maybe that's where they'll go with it. But man, he's way too over the top.
Yeah.
They really
Yeah,
should have reined it in a little
The
bit.
next game's going to be Mass Effect 4 Space Football, and Vega's the quarterback.
With
have-
robotic feet.
Does he have robotic legs?
Yeah, he's all robot except for his head.
All right.
They
Oh,
BioWare
they're
actually,
looking out for nothing.
BioWare used Freddie Prinze Jr. for Dragon Age Inquisition, and people really praise his performance in that game too as the Iron Bull. So I guess Freddie Prinze Jr. is just killing it as a voice actor,
Yeah, it's awesome.
not
I
a real
don't
actor.
remember if he did the voice acting for this or not, but there was an animated Mass Effect movie that dealt with Vega's backstory, and he was on some mission previously where like everybody got killed, and that was sort of alluded to in the games, but you don't really learn a ton about it. But this movie was about that mission and what happened. And I thought like it's kind of like with Halo. I've read a lot of the comics and the novels, so it expanded on kind of like the mythos and lore of the game and made it a little bit more enjoyable. And I felt the same way after having watched the animated movie. I mean, it wasn't exceptional, but it did add more content to it and made me appreciate him as a character because he was fleshed out a little bit better. I like stuff like that.
Are there any other characters we wanted to talk about?
Well, there are some non-player characters, which I think we should discuss. Specifically, Kai Lang and the Elusive Man.
Yeah. So Elusive Man, he kind of goes out on his own in this game, and he has his own solution for what to do. And I think I'm always a big Elusive Man fan because he has he's a villain, but he has a motive that makes sense. You know, like things make sense to him. He's not doing anything to be evil for evil's sake. He is doing things to, fix a problem that he sees, and he thinks he knows how to fix it. So I really like all my interactions with Elusive Man in the game. I think they're really interesting. And it's, you're always like clashing with him all the time and trying to outsmart him and be one step ahead, and then finally have that confrontation in his throne room where, you always see him standing, and it's awesome to be in there finally. I thought he was a really great presence in this game.
Yeah, I really enjoyed him in this game. Martin Sheen does a really great job as the Elusive Man while we're talking about voice actors. But he was just, by the time this game comes to a conclusion, you almost feel bad for the Elusive Man. Like he's fully indoctrinated. We didn't even talk about that. So the Reapers have this ability to sort of brainwash people when they're in the presence of them. That might be important information for the end of this podcast.
And they have no idea it's happening. It's totally like subliminal.
It happened to Saren at the end of the first one, and it happens to the Elusive Man at the end of the third one. And he just he was a villain, but he was relatable. And by the end, he's just sort of like gone off his rocker, and you feel kind of bad for him. At least I did.
Yeah, by the end, absolutely. I mean, he gets indoctrinated, but the whole time while it's happening to him, you kind of see where he's coming from. Maybe. I mean, you don't really know what he's doing in this game, but through Mass Effect 2, you learn his motives and learn that he really does mean well for humanity. He's not like a selfish person. He's just kind of like misguided in a way.
Right.
You can definitely side with him.
Yeah, the whole series definitely. I feel like the overall agenda that the game has is that we should all get along. We should work with other species. We shouldn't be like humanity first. Like I feel like they're pushing that agenda, but I don't think one necessarily has to agree with that. And they make Cerberus out to be a bad thing, that the elusive man is an enemy, and you sort of have this very tentative sort of truce with him for the second one to achieve your own agendas, and then in the third one, he kind of unravels and becomes kind of a Fruit Loop by the end of it. But, I mean, one could not agree with BioWare's agenda that they're pushing with the game and completely agree with the elusive man's approach on how to deal with other species in the galaxy. And then ultimately feel really bad for this guy who completely went off his rocker and lost it.
Yep.
I feel like there's a real elusive man following in the South somewhere. So before we move on to the ending, are there any other points we want to make about the story?
Yeah, we didn't talk about Kai Lang.
Well, Kai Lang, I mean, I just like him. If anybody hates him, then we could talk about it.
I thought it was all right.
I liked him. I thought it was interesting.
Like the original Phantom prototype. Like, they made Phantoms, and they made Kai Lang as like the ultimate Phantom. You know?
I found him to be a menacing villain, and I guess that was important.
And the fights you had with him are interesting. I like them.
Yeah.
He kind of went out like a bitch, though.
You just kill him, right? I mean,
yeah.
Didn't he sneak up on you and then you get him?
Oh yeah, that cutscene. Yeah. He sneaks up on you, blast him because you're Shepard. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
He probably should have had an explosive device in his body, and then he says he bit something in his mouth and his eyes started ticking, and then you had to get out of there and the whole thing blows up. That would have been better probably, but
that would have been great.
Here's what I want to talk about. This is one of my big complaints with this game that I thought was just so poorly handled, and that is how every ally you had in the game from the other games was in here. Grunt was here, Rex was here, Jacob was there, Miranda, everybody, Kasumi, they all had a part in the game. And some of them had a mission that you did with them, like Jack had an Earl Academy and all those missions. That would have been an excellent opportunity for them to join your squad and be one of your squad mates just for the one mission. So when you're doing Jack's mission in her academy, she's on your squad, and it's like pick one other squad member. You're like Garrus. And then Garrus and Jack can have some banter, and then Jack's in your team, and then she's gone. And then you get the Rex mission, and then you got the Morden mission. Everybody has a mission they can go on with you, and that would be a perfect time to have them be on there, do some exposition, show off some new moves they learned, and then have a little tie back to the nostalgia of Mass Effect, like you and Miranda again, looking at that ass, and you and Jacob and him making his grunts. That'd be fun to have, but instead they have these, Jacob's wounded, so you go without him, or Miranda's and doing something in the meantime and hologramming back and forth with you, or Jack is covering you from above. Instead, what the hell are you doing?
That's a very good point, and that would have added a lot of flavor to the game with what I have to assume would be pretty much minimal effort on their part.
I mean, yeah, they had all the sprites were already made. All the models were already made in the multiplayer. Like there was already a Krogan fully functional. There's an Asari. There's they're everything. They made everything. They went all out, and then they don't let you have them on your team. It's stupid.
Right.
And then they released Citadel DLC, which let you have them all as allies. You can go do the little holodeck battle with anybody. So it's like they finally 2 years later realized how big of a mistake they made, and oh yeah, maybe somebody wants to run Rex in their team. Yeah, obviously, you know what I mean. They finally did it, but what a huge fail on their part to not have that happen at the start.
Is that the DLC where it ends with a party in your apartment?
Yeah.
What a weird DLC.
That was a good one though. It was
great. It was a really great wrap up to the story, and it was just it was enjoyable. It was a sort of a brief sort of breath of fresh air from the war that's going on. But it's really, I mean, as a DLC, as a thing to do in a video game, an action RPG video game, it's retarded.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to it than the party, but yeah, that was...
Yeah, no, there is, but that I mean, literally, it's a DLC with a house party at the end.
Yeah,
that's silly.
I like that though.
It's awesome.
I liked it. I don't think I could defend it.
Yeah, it is kind of weird, but I'm thankful it was there. So okay, let's talk about the ending.
Wait, just one quick thing. I just really want to praise this game for its indirect storytelling.
Mm.
I sort of complained in the first one how every level felt empty and just sort of built as a level. Like each outpost that you go to or whatever, it's just they were huge, but there were like 3 people in them, and you would take 20 minutes to run from one person to the other side of the room to go talk to the other person and go back and forth. Um, this game really feels alive. Like there are people everywhere doing things on the Citadel. You know, people that you have no interaction with. They're total NPCs, and they look like they're going about their business. They look war torn, and then the world felt alive. And then while I was doing that mission on the moon, the Turian moon, it was like everything was happening around me, and then in the background there was an entire space battle going on. There were Reapers in the far distance that were having their own battle, and there was a space battle going on over here. And you got that feeling that you were in the middle of a war. So I have to give it a lot of credit for improving over the years on that.
Yeah, that background, especially the Paladin one with the air battle, was incredible. And then that happened again on the Asari homeworld. It was like under siege, and you can see the background being bombarded constantly. It was very epic.
And the Reapers come off as incredibly menacing in this game. They have the potential to be real goofy. They're just big, giant metal squids flying through space. And like, you know, from a Lovecraftian standpoint, that's like, you know, an old terror. But realistically, they're just big, giant squids flying through space, and that's pretty goofy. So to actually make them like a terrifying villain, that some credit has to be given to somebody. I don't know who, but somebody has to get credit for it.
That noise they make is sort of horrible.
Yeah,
but in a good way. And
Yeah,
like
I guess so.
to an extent where like they're even menacing on the map screen.
yeah,
It's like, oh, I gotta get out of here.
right. I like that it's both a music cue and potentially like a sound that they're making.
Yeah.
That's really good video game making right there. All right, do we want to talk about the ending now?
Yeah, let's talk about the ending.
I will say, Alex, the first sort of interaction I ever had with you was watching your YouTube rant on the ending of this video game.
Yeah.
Very specific. I remember where I was sitting in a parking lot waiting to have a meeting with a lawyer, and I was like 25 minutes early, and Dan had sent me this link about you ranting about this. I'm like, oh, I guess I gotta listen to this.
I gotta watch that again myself.
So it comes full circle.
Yeah. So if you know who's not familiar with the ending, but the ending is kind of a little strange, and then people did not like it, and then this other theory came out called indoctrination theory, which is a fan-made theory that said that the player actually got indoctrinated, or Shepard got indoctrinated, and the whole time you're making your choices at the end of the game, you're led away from picking the destroy ending because that's the good ending. And the other two, synthesis and control, are framed as better. And if you choose either of those endings, then you fall for the indoctrination, and then Shepard becomes a Reaper, and then whatever. And if you resist and destroy, then you did good. And then they show a little clip of Shepard breathing in a bunch of rubble.
It's so quick. It's like it's like half a second.
So the idea there is then Shepard never got off Earth, and he never went up into the Citadel, and then he wakes up from his like dreamlike battle, and then he gets up and can handle business. And that's kind of the indoctrination theory angle. I mean, I like that better than the straightforward ending, that's for sure.
Can you guys just like real quick go over the different endings and then tell me which one you picked or which one you have a preference for?
Yeah, so there's 3 endings. You got the red ending, which is called Destroy. And in that ending, you send out a shock wave that destroys all machines. It's like a big EMP pulse that destroys all machines. It'll destroy the mass relays. It'll kill the Geth. It'll kill EDI. And it'll kill all the Reapers. The control ending, which is the ending that's supported by the Elusive Man, is where you use yourself to step into this beam and then take control of the Reapers. And then they're still there, but they're just under your control. This is the same thing that Legion does to the Geth if you take that path. It destroys Shepard, but then his consciousness becomes the AI of the Reapers. Or the Synthesis ending, which makes everybody into a hybrid machine human, and then everybody doesn't have to kill each other anymore because they're all the same. Kind of like breeding racism out of the world. If everybody becomes brown, then you can't, hate on any given culture anymore, which is like pretty sloppy and stupid idea. But that's kind of like the best ending. That's the one you have to earn with the maximum amount of readiness points.
Right. Like, common gameplay elements lead you to believe that that's the right answer. Because you have to work so hard to even open up that option. And it is sort of like a tree-hugging answer. It's like, well, we all just get along, so pick this one.
Nobody dies. We all become the same, and then the Reapers no longer have to kill humanity. We all just build Lego buildings all the rest of our lives. I chose Destroy. And they did it. It was interesting because I play Paragon almost always. And in this case, Anderson supported the Destroy ending, and Anderson is your Paragon guy. And Elusive Man supports the Control ending, and he's your Renegade guy. But the Destroy line is red, and the Control line is blue. And it's really kind of confusing when they put it up for you, and you're like, oh. And Destruction is, of course, Renegade, right? And kind of Control and Discipline is Paragon. So, but at the same time, your whole mission for 3 games is destroy the Reapers. So I stuck to my guns, and my boy Anderson was my homie, and I went in there and destroyed it. That's what I did.
What did you pick, Greg?
I picked the Synthesis ending.
That's what I picked as
You got
well.
indoctrinated, son.
Yeah, no, I was definitely indoctrinated. It just, I don't know. I'm a sucker for video games, and I feel like the game sort of played me. Like, well, that's the good ending. It's the one you have to unlock. Everybody's happy at the end. So that's the one I picked.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why I chose it.
Why did you choose it?
Well, I didn't want to destroy the Geth or Edie because I'm of the opinion that if you have true artificial intelligence, that's a life form, and wiping that out would be just as bad as if there was an option to wipe out all biological life and just keep the mechanical. I think those are equally bad options. I didn't want to sacrifice myself to control the Reapers. I didn't really have any interest in that, and I didn't really think that they should be floating around and being a thing. So I thought that Synthesis was the best option because I thought it allowed the galaxy to move forward in the most productive and positive way, given the options that were presented.
I would just like to quickly state that the lead up to the choice, when you get beamed up to the Citadel and there's all the dead bodies everywhere around you, and you're taking that you're wounded and you're taking that really slow walk through these piles of corpses. That's a really epic moment in that game for me. It's truly horrific, and it's a moment in the game that I haven't felt maybe since then, where it's just sort of sadness and terror.
Yeah, before that, you had to shoot that one Marauder in slow motion, and that was such an epic moment. And it was a bit too hard to do, in my opinion, because I died 10 times before I got him every time I did it. And I call myself pretty good at that game, and I still can't ever. You got to get exact headshots on them perfectly, 5 of them. But that part is really epic, and it sets up an epicness, and then you go up, and then you run into the Elusive Man, and then you do that whole conversation with him. Then you run into Anderson, and then you have that conversation with him, and it's all very awesome, and the whole Anderson conversation is just the most touching thing in the world.
That is one of the most touching moments in video game history. It actually affected me in an emotional way. That was very sad, that last conversation with Anderson.
I cry every time. I'll say it right here in this podcast.
I don't remember this conversation at all.
Look, dust the game off, beat it. You got to beat all 3 games one shot. You got to have that. You got to have that 40-hour, interaction with Anderson to get that conversation. But he tells you, he just tells you did a good job. Whatever happens, you did great, and then he dies, and it's just the saddest thing in the world because
It's so
Anderson
sad.
died. And then Shepard just like closes his eyes and he's gonna die too. And then he's like, he gets a call in his radio and he's got to do something else. And he's like, and he gets up and he's bleeding everywhere. It's just it's crazy. It's so good. And Anderson just dies. It's the saddest thing in the world. Spoiler alert.
I have a save game, Dan, right before that conversation. You can come over and play it.
All right.
And then you can cry your eyes out in front of me.
For the record, I played all 3 games for the first time in the span of like 6 months. So it's been years since I've played it. I mean, I played it through once and that was it. That's why I don't remember like specific conversations that well.
But you got to hear the conversation again then. I mean,
yeah, that one's great.
So now about the ending,
But there's a 4th ending, isn't there?
Well, sort of.
There is now. There wasn't originally.
Yeah,
Right.
the 4th ending is like you just decline all 3 options and then the Reapers win. That's the 4th ending. That's what you call the bad ending.
Yeah, that's the real bad ending.
I guess I'm getting more at the extended ending DLC thing that they tacked on.
Okay, yeah. So this is people. One of the big complaints of people is what why the ending was so bad is you don't get to see what happens to anybody afterwards. What happened to Rex? What happened to the Geth? These questions. Which, in my opinion, if you watch my video about me raging about it, it's called Use Your Imagination, dumbass. That's what it's called. Like, what do you think happened to the Geth? Like, imagine the universe. Like, what happened in the 6 months that you weren't playing in the game? Like between 2 and 3, what happened in those 6 months? Use your imagination. Like everybody went about their lives and did their best. That's what happens. But everybody just kept bitching about it, and then telling them to remake the ending, remake all the games, like this ridiculous nonsense. And then they actually, much to my dismay, they buckled and they did what they asked for. And they gave them, and actually in my video, I think before the extended cut came out, I actually said, what do you idiots want? Like a flip book of happy fairy tale endings for everybody? Is that what you want? You can't imagine it in your own head? And then I went over what would probably happen and just screaming it. And that's exactly what they released. They released essentially a flip book of here's Rex, owning owning all of his Krogans, and here's Liara being the Shadow Broker, and here's the Geth and the Quarians giving each other hugs and having fucking kids and shit.
Kumbaya, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so they made all these they weren't even animated. They were just still pictures of what happens. So after you beat the game, whatever ending you picked, you always got this set of slides which showed you images of what happens now, and it was all pretty ho hum in my opinion, but it made some people happy, I guess. I don't know.
So 2 questions. Do we think the indoctrination theory is correct? Do you think that's what they were going for?
Unfortunately, not. That is not what they were going for, and it's very disappointing for me. And I'm obviously completely eating my words and flipping 180 on me from 2 years ago, because still to this day, my one logical thing is, how could writers who wrote 3 games of that caliber just all get syphilis at the very end and in their delirium write that ending as it was meant to be straightforward? You know what I mean?
Right.
What were they? I don't know what the hell was going on there, if that really happened, but the fact that they released that extended cut, which kind of reinforced the straightforward ending, and then they never ever came out and said, here's indoctrination theory is true, which they really should have done.
Yeah. They
never said that. Instead, they just kind of flip-flopped about it and released extended cut, and then released Citadel, and never mentioned it. I have no option but to believe that they actually just wrote a truly terrible ending. But it's not terrible for the reasons people think it's terrible. It's not like they didn't explain this enough or what happened here. But there was a lot of weirdness that didn't make sense. Right. How did the Elusive Man get on there? And how did Anderson get on there at the very end? What are they all doing there? You went through the beam, and that's the only way up, and they're there anyway. It's well, okay, all of a sudden Elusive Man's here.
And with the Destroy ending, why is Shepard taking a breath at the end of that one?
And then,
did he fall back to Earth?
What's that about? Yeah, taking a breath from what? Where's the rubble from? You don't destroy the Citadel you're on. That's there. And then the rubble blows up, and then you're like, I don't get it. And why only in that ending do you wake up? It's just weird. It's a weird thing. I don't know what they were doing, and there's some mystique they added, but none of it made any sense.
I don't think that the indoctrination theory is what the writers were intending. I don't think it's like a secret, subtle story element that people happen to piece together. I think it is fan fiction cobbled together in a very clever way, but I still think it's simply fan fiction to cover up poor, ultimately poor story writing.
Which is
I no, please.
which is something that Dan and I actually debate a lot when it comes to Destiny, because I'm totally discontent with the ending of Destiny, and I'm like grasping at straws. Like I watch every YouTube video, like here's what's really going on. I've watched like 5 of them today. It's just like I'm so desperate for an answer that I'll take whatever I can get. I think the indoctrination theory is a lot more sound. I think if you want to believe that, I do not fault you at all for thinking that's the ending of the game. I think that might be what they intended, and people are just too dumb, and EA buckled because they didn't want a backlash anymore.
I the reason that I don't think that that's the case is because very little else in that series is that subtle. And that's not really, I mean, it's not like Fez or something else where the puzzles and the secrets are like impossible to find and you got to go on like web forums to find out the information and like secret guides and stuff like that. Like, it's just not that kind of game. So when somebody comes up with a theory like this that's so subtle and so like a sentence from one game in one section becomes like pivotal to something, and they like connect these threads, it strikes me more as a conspiracy theory than a legitimate theory. And I just, there's nothing else in that series that speaks to that level of subtleness.
Well, you're kind of right, but I don't fully agree because there's no secrets to be found. It's not, here's a few things. I mean, indoctrination happens all through the series, and they talk about it a lot. It happened to Saren. It happens to the Elusive Man. It happens to the woman in Arrival. There's a lot of it happening, and it's subtle. And if you wanted to wonder for a second, why doesn't this ever happen to Shepard? Like if you ever I never did. I'll admit, I never thought about it. Like you're around Reapers all the time, and you don't get indoctrinated. What's that about? Well, maybe you do. And then in 3, they really have a change of pace where they have these nightmares that Shepard has. With the child, the kid. And those are weird, and they're unique to 3. But that is like a really big hint to me that something different is going on in this game. Because no other game had dreams. And then you have these weird dreams with the Reaper sounds in them. And then you got this weird inky color, and it's really bizarre, and it feels like something's invading your mind, right? And they're only in this game. So then why would the dreams be here? What's different about this game than the other 2 games? These are things that make you think.
And the kid in your dreams is the same kid that appears at the end on the Citadel.
Yep, that's also true.
Okay, here's the thing though, is that I mean it's sort of like a well-established phenomenon that if somebody has something truly traumatic happen to them, like I think I don't think it would be unreasonable to suggest that Shepard is suffering from some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder when he sees this kid get completely annihilated by a Reaper in front of him at the beginning of the game. And then to have that continue to haunt him, and also to make him a little bit more of a relatable character, an emotional character, a little bit more, not intelligent, but like emotional, have more of a connection with him instead of him just being an action hero. It struck me as like the game designers trying to make him more dynamic as like an actual human being and not just this thing that you control to shoot stuff.
Well, I mean, that is also true, but I mean, Shepard's seen some shit, you know what I mean? He lost his entire squad at Akuz. He's seen...
But that's the squad. Those are soldiers. Those are people that signed up for that. That's not an 8-year-old kid getting destroyed by a laser beam from an alien.
Yeah, I mean, it depends.
Pretty
intense. If you're the Shepard that's from the streets of Earth, like the slums, he would have seen kids get killed probably. When he was with Thane had those memories about, children and stuff. And I mean, I see what you're saying, but I don't think Shepard's getting traumatized now. You know what I mean? I don't think he's going to go through a lifetime of nonstop combat, seeing, genocide happen constantly, just to go, oh, this kid died, now I'm going to have nightmares. And I mean, it definitely is a stress thing, but Shepard would have been having nightmares like that his whole life, and we never saw them. The fact that they're so vivid and we're looking at them now, it's like, you player, you're watching these nightmares now.
And also the visual cues of those nightmares are the same cues that you're given when you see the Elusive Man indoctrinated.
Oh yeah, that too. Yep.
Like the color scheme, the sort of like black tendrils on the corners of the screen and stuff. Those are all symbols of the indoctrination later on. So like, yeah, I think you can excuse why he would have nightmares, but why would they choose those visual cues if not to intend that?
Yeah.
I don't know, but I mean, I'm a strong proponent, and Greg and you and I have discussed this before. I'm a strong proponent of there's the author's intent, and then there's your interpretation, and ultimately, the author's intent is the quote-unquote correct interpretation because it's what they wanted, and they're the ones that wrote the story. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but ultimately, there are people that wrote this game, wrote this story, and either they intended that or they didn't. And short of them coming out and saying indoctrination is not what we intended for this game, there's no way to ultimately know. And then so we're left speculating. I think it's an interesting theory. I think it's clever, and I think somebody put a lot of work into putting it together. But I ultimately don't think that that's what the game designers intended.
Yeah. I mean, you're essentially right. You're right. It's not what they intended, and if they did, they would have said it by now. And then there was like this evidence that came out where they had a different ending, which involved dark matter, and then that got leaked. So then they changed the ending, and that like was kind of confirmed by a lot of people that really did happen. And then that makes me believe that they really did just half-ass a piece of shit ending instead of just going with the one that was leaked. Like, just share the leaked one then.
That explains why it was so shoddy. It was like they panicked and made a new ending.
All right, Dan, you have a question.
Yes, I do. So I have a question to pose to you guys about the ending. So they chose to go with this option of 3/4 options, and they're sort of convoluted and bizarre, and like you're never really happy with any of them. What if the game just chose a much more straightforward route of you've got 2 options, and one of them is that if you've done well enough in the game and you've done everything you're supposed to do, and your battle readiness is high enough, you simply defeat the Reapers. And if it's not high enough, all life in the galaxy is annihilated and the universe starts over.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly it would have been a fine ending, and it's unfortunate they didn't just. That's a great ending. You know what I mean?
Like, how do you like? There's no complaint there. I mean, even if you're not happy with the fact that it's maybe not creative or original enough, I mean, it is the obvious thing to do. Which, you know, I guess if they want to do something that's not totally obvious, I don't knock them for trying something else. But if I mean, you focus test this stuff. You try, you see what people think. There's no way people would have thought this 3-ending bullshit was a smart idea.
Yeah.
Just go to the default option. Everybody would have been happy.
Like the way I was thinking about it is the Citadel or the what's the weapon called? What is the weapon called? The Crucible.
Catalyst? Oh yeah, the Crucible.
The Crucible is just a giant EMP pulse, and it just destroys all technology, like the destroy ending. That's kind of what I was expecting. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, what would kill all the machines? Well, a giant EMP pulse that is incredible. You know what I mean? And then that would have been a fine ending for me. But then they added like all this other nonsense to it that it made it kind of like it devalued it. If all it was is if you have enough to like hold them off long enough to power up the machine, like all that you unite the galaxy and they're all like fighting in tandem, you know, brothers in arms. You have enough of it to turn the machine on and it turns them all off. You know what I mean? Perfect. Or you don't have enough. And a lot of them die, and then half the machine gets broken, so like a lot of planets get killed or whatever, but it still kind of goes off. Or versus you just don't have enough guys to hold it off, and they just destroy it before it goes off, and you lose. Like just gradually have more or less success, and not have these nonsense endings. Would have been so much better.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And I think too, and I like that idea of using the Crucible as like the final weapon and that's what they make you think is going to happen, and then it ultimately doesn't even really matter. But the thing is,
it does do the stuff, but yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah. It's your decision. It's your decision when you're up on the Citadel that makes the difference.
Yeah.
But if they, crap! I was gonna have a point. Now I totally lost it.
It sounded really good.
Yeah, I was soaked.
Oh, I'm choking. Oh, okay, I got it. So Javik is when they introduce him in the second one. He is kind of a dick. And the Protheans are very like militaristic culture, and they sort of kept all the other races down. And he was always like surprised to see these races like flourishing now. And I feel like the current state of the Milky Way is much more multicultural than it was under the reign of the Protheans. And so I thought it would have been like an extra added jab to the Prothean reign of, 40,000 years ago, if we, the humans, and everybody else, working together, managed to solve this. But they, with their sort of militaristic thumb on the universe, were not able to fully achieve it.
Yeah, that also would have been a great ending where, for some reason, the universe has never been utilitarian like it was during the Protheans. Like, it was always one race dominated, and then they didn't have enough kind of creativity to overcome. But then this time, in this cycle, we all kept it segmented, and then the uniquenesses, of all the different races, they surprised the Reapers somehow, and they beat them. Like, with the Geth on our side and the Arachni on our side, and all the races united, that somehow created a combined arms effort that the Reapers couldn't overcome. That also would have been a great ending, And we're not even writers that we came up with that. Like in 20 minutes, and these guys are like a full-time staff working on this. They came up with that.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there, guys. They all got AIDS.
This is the quickest tangent in the world. This is what blows my mind when you have bad storytelling, bad science fiction, like the Star Wars prequels, things like that, or huge blockbuster science fiction movies where they just completely botch it. And it's like, guys, you had so much money is being spent on this, and you have so much creativity at your disposal. How do you F this up? How is that possible? How do you not focus test it and realize this is terrible? Like, even if you don't, when other people tell you it's terrible, how does this happen?
Feels impossible.
The last thing I have to say about the ending is that actually at the time of playing it, I was not terribly disappointed by it. Like, when the ending of the game happened, the thing with Anderson, I went up, I made the choice, Shepard sacrifices himself, like, that still had an emotional impact with me. I left, like, the room, like, I put the controller down, walked out of the room, content. It wasn't until, like, later when I really started to think about it and everything that it started to, like, upset me. So I still feel like, to a certain extent, something has to be said for that. Like, I was fine with it immediately.
Yeah, I was too.
The internet groupthink definitely has an impact on things. Like, I think, like, with Destiny, that whole Reddit community and elsewhere, like, it's sort of like a feedback loop of hate, and everybody just sort of builds on each other's dislike of something. I mean, when I played the ending, I distinctly remember, Greg, you asked me if I had finished it yet, and I hadn't, and I think you wanted to get into this whole, like, how the internet was losing their mind over the ending. And I hadn't gotten there yet. And I did it, and I stayed away from all the information, and I did it, and I had sort of the same reaction you did. I was like, that's fine, I guess. And then, the internet happened, and it went sort of bananas.
Yeah. All right, we got to wrap this up, but there's still a few other things to talk about. This game had multiplayer, and I know, Alex, you're a big fan of it, so why don't you talk to that a bit?
Yeah, so they released probably the greatest demo in gaming history, where they released like the first 15 minutes of gameplay single player, and then fully functional online multiplayer. That was like the demo, the beta. And it was out for like 3 months, and I played that so much. It was the funnest thing in the world, and the way it works is it's a squad-based, it's the Horde mode from Halo 2 or Gears of War.
Yeah.
Where you were a squad of 4 people, and then you fend off, 10 waves of enemies, and there's 3 different kinds of enemies, and you have tons of characters to pick, and you could be Volus, you could be Krogan, and they released these in patches as the game went on, like the Volus were released later, but you could be any race you ever wanted to be except for a Hanar. You can essentially be in this game. And you can see what's a biotic, Batarian like, what's an Asari engineer like, and then really get a feel of that. And it's super cool, and there's a lot of difficulty to it, and you got the teamwork and the squad-based gameplay, and the whole thing was just amazing. And I played so much of the demo before the game was released, and it's the demo only had Cerberus available as the enemy type. You couldn't pick every race. But then when it came time to play the game, I felt like I was playing on Insanity, obviously, and it was like the easiest game in the world because I was like, grinding myself on gold on whatever, and it wasn't even near that hard on the highest difficulty level in single player. So I like really breezed through the game, other than like when I had to fight that stupid Marauder at the end. The game was just a complete cakewalk. It was pretty funny, but multiplayer is just, I love it. I have like 800 hours logged or something insane.
That's crazy. Like I thought I played a lot of that, but boy, that's not even compared. Like I can't even compare to what you did.
You guys didn't like it that much.
No,
that's not true.
It's fine.
It's horde mode. That's the thing. It's only so fun for so long, I think, for the average player.
Interesting.
I thought it was good. We both played it a whole bunch when we were playing Mass Effect. And part of your war readiness in the single player is tied to the multiplayer. So they really inspire you to play, at least I think 10 hours of it or something. So we played a lot of it, but horde mode just in general never has a tremendous appeal to me. It's fun for a little while, but eventually I get tired of it.
That's interesting you say that because I'm the opposite. Like when I had Halo, what was the one with Horde? Halo ODST.
ODST.
That was all I played. I got the game and me and Yuri fired it up. We played a little bit of single player until we got to like a point where we kind of got stuck, because we're playing Legendary. And then let's check out Horde mode. You know what I mean? And then from that point on, every night, come over, we're playing Horde. Come over, we're playing it. And we played it all the time. And we're like obsessed with how far we can get and how big of a score we can get. Obsessed. Because it's that it never ends, and it's like this, brothers in arms kind of mentality where you both are suffering through this really difficult thing together. I love that feeling. I love it. Covering each other. Like in single player, the combat never gets intense enough in Mass Effect to compare with how intense it gets in the in Platinum difficulty. And I just love it. I love it.
I would definitely say that the Mass Effect, of all the Horde modes I played, because I played a lot of Gears of War 3's Horde mode, played a good amount of Firefight. Mass Effect's definitely my favorite. I like the way that you're constantly unlocking guns and leveling up, and I like their prestige thing where you can, how does it work exactly? You would know better than me. But you can sort of like sacrifice a creature to redo all your specs.
Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, you send your guy in to the single player campaign to help your readiness, and then you start over leveling up a new guy. So you kind of like farm readiness.
Yeah.
Sort of. That is pretty cool.
So like I like that element. So there was a lot to it that I enjoyed. One YouTube video I saw mentioned that they really created multiplayer because as just a way to get money out of you. I don't know how true that is or not. They do have, in-app purchases, whatever they're called in a video game, you know, where you can sort of, just pay your way to better stuff. That always frustrates me a lot, and that's a big Electronic Arts thing. They do it in Battlefield too.
Yeah, I mean you can, but it's not a competitive game, so it's like who cares? Like if I could buy my way to be better than you, then that's an issue for you. But like we're cooperatively fighting the AI, so what do you care if I have the best stuff or the worst stuff? It's like, but I spent $0 on it and had a great experience. There's really nothing you can you can accelerate yourself to get better guns, but you don't really need better guns for anything.
Right.
I spent a few bucks. I bought a couple of packs, but probably like 2 or 3, and then I was like, this is really stupid because we got like Greg. I feel like we got like hardcore into it for a brief period of time. And I was like, oh man, I want more stuff. I want to unlock stuff because I'm like a sucker for game loot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
Which will come up again on a future episode.
I'm 800 hours in, and I'm not even close to having everything unlocked in that game. So that's
crazy.
I do think
them for still providing content to that extent.
Yeah.
I do remember this was, I don't know, like 2 months ago. We tried to play some Mass Effect 3 multiplayer together.
Oh, God.
And it was the first time I'd logged into the game in such a long time. And they had all these characters unlocked now that you could play as, and I thought that was I really enjoyed that they were expanding that and letting you play as more races than what you would really get to play as normally in the game.
Yeah,
or having in your party.
You could be a Geth Prime, and you can be a Krogan Battle Master with a giant sledgehammer. It's ridiculous.
You said you could be a Volus. Is that true?
Yeah, there's 3 Voluses.
Those
And
little guys?
the little roly jelly bean looking dudes.
Huh.
That's great.
You could be a Volus sniper and carry a Widowmaker and your little egg, and you roll around like a Humpty Dumpty, and you shoot this giant gun. It's so funny. It's awesome.
I'm surprised they don't let you play as a Hanar because there's
Yeah.
what's his name, Blasto or something. He's
Yep.
like that action star. Like that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, that would have been funny. I wish they kind of put him in at the end. They were saying Volus are going to be released, and I was like, there's no way they're putting in Volus. There's no way. And then they put in Volus. There's Volus. And they're terrible.
So,
they're bad.
if you like horde mode, they do it's a really good horde mode if you're into that sort of thing. Like it's fleshed out. There's a lot to it. If that's your jam, then you should go play that.
Check it out.
So our last topic of the day is the DLC for Mass Effect 3.
Who has it?
Not me.
I've got some of it.
You guys
There's Leviathan, Citadel. What's you have listed here, Alex? Prothean Day 1. I don't know what that is.
That's the Javik, the Prothean. He was DLC that you only got if you got the pass. So you can. It's like he's like Zaid essentially.
Was he not in 2? Am I making that up? I said that before. I'm getting my games confused. Was he only in 3?
Javik is only in 3. He's a Prothean.
Right.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, well I remember that one then, and then Omega.
Yep.
So
Omega is what's her name? The sorry chick from.
Yeah.
What the hell's her name?
Oh boy.
Well, anyway, she takes Omega. Aria is her name.
Yeah.
So she wants Omega back from
Cerberus.
Yeah. So you have to go and help her get it back. The DLCs in this game were, other than Citadel, which is exceptional, they were horribly disappointing. They added very little new content, and essentially not much to the story. I mean, it was kind of cool to like hook up with Arya and go get Omega, but it's like, what do you give a shit? You know, who cares if she gets Omega back? I don't care. I'm trying to stop the Reapers, and I got to take a detour to help her get Omega back. I mean, who cares? You know, if the Reapers come and they blow everything up anyway, well, you got to get you back on your throne. I don't give a shit. So I thought that mission was just stupid. Like, why would Shepard ever agree to do that with her? You know, like, oh yeah, I will help you do this. I'll take a detour from my mission that's very important to go on a suicide run through Omega. Done. And
Well, we're all going to die, but at least that nightclub is saved.
Yeah, and nothing really new is introduced. In Leviathan, they introduced some new story elements about like who made the Reapers and why they did it. That's kind of cool, but they could have exposed that in a different way without having players pay $20 for it. You know what I mean? That's cruel. And then also adds really nothing new.
Are those your final thoughts on the DLC or? Well,
Citadel obviously was the best DLC ever released on any game because it added a ton of new content. That awesome party at the end. You can actually there's like a holodeck game where you can just like challenge like it's a mini horde mode within the game where you fight. You can bring anybody as your ally from any game ever. So you can have Rex and Caden with you. You can bring Tali and Javik, whatever you want, and you can go on this missions. That's really fun. And you fight a clone of yourself, which is super cool. And it introduced 2 new guns. So that was a really good DLC. But they came out so late.
Here's my take on the DLC. And this is not counting price because I don't know. I wasn't really keeping track of that stuff. Generally, I personally don't want to really ever pay for DLC. I think you paid for the game, you should get the game. But that's a whole like other issue. So setting costs aside, Leviathan I really enjoyed because you have this really epic battle at the beginning, and then you have this whole like underwater sort of mysterious adventure, and you don't really know what's going to happen exactly. And it reminded me a lot of a mission underwater from Knights of the Old Republic. And I like the story elements that it added, but ultimately I agree with you that ultimately it's really not that critical because it's like you sort of if the Reapers are godlike, you find the gods that created God, but it still leaves you with like, well, where did they come from? You know, it doesn't really answer anything. It's like you're sort of left where you started. I still really enjoyed it, and I was really tense throughout the whole underwater part. Well, I thought it was interesting and added some interesting mythos to the series. The Prothean mission I really enjoyed just because I liked Javik. I liked him as a character. I liked having him along. I thought he was, as an archaeologist myself and being interested in history, I thought it was really interesting to have this sort of anachronistic guy who doesn't fit in the current time, and is completely displaced. And the mission itself, it was whatever, but I really enjoyed his addition to the whole series. Omega, I totally agree with you that it's completely unnecessary and distracts from your main story element of we got to stop the Reapers. But there's also like so many other things throughout the entire game that are like that. Like every time I do anything in that game, I'm looking around for things to like pick up and find. And like I'm on a mission, guys. We got to stop the Reapers. And we're spending all our time looking around for like loot and guns and ammo and other crap. Like that's kind of silly.
I really don't want to dwell on DLC, but it would be really, really easy for them. All this stuff came out after the game ended. Set it after the events of Mass Effect 3. You're like, hey, you saved the world. Oh, I guess Shepard's dead. Never mind. Bad idea.
Yeah, no, they honestly, they could have just done the DLC, and they could have had you play as Vega, and they could have had no Shepard.
That's true. Yeah, but
That
his
should be
muscles
cool.
take up the entire screen. You would never see what.
Yeah, it would not work because he covers up. Yeah,
Yeah, but when the Reapers die, they take some of his muscles away.
Yeah.
So I thought as a mission, as a DLC, I think Omega is fine. I think it's a totally adequate mission to do. I just think I agree with Alex that it sort of doesn't really fit with the pacing of the game in general. And the final one, Citadel, is a ton of fun. It's sort of like this action-adventure, ridiculous sort of fight through the Citadel. It's a lot of fun. And then you get this ridiculous house party at the end where you chill in, what's-his-name's apartment. And
Anderson.
just walk around. Yeah, you just walk around talking to everybody and checking everything out, and it's just it's a very like it's a definite like fan service. Like for people that have been around for the whole thing, they would really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if this one has necessarily the best DLC available. Probably I think I would go with Mass Effect 2.
Yeah.
All right, so let's wrap this up. Do we have any just final thoughts on the Mass Effect series in general?
My favorite series in the world. I'll be playing it. I'll force my kids to play it. I'll be playing when I'm an old man.
I think we all agree that this is one of the best video game series of all time. And, I mean, can you just boil down why you like it so much in a sentence?
Shepard.
I mean, it has the best role-playing of any game that I played. Like, as far as actually choices being made that affect the game, this is the best one that I've played that does it.
I feel like Shepard matters. I feel like he's a real character, and I feel like his companions matter. They manage. I mean, there's more than one sentence, but they got me to have loyalty towards these characters and care about them and want them to survive and want me to play with them. That's a pretty significant feat. There's a lot of games with a lot of stupid characters and a lot of stupid junk in them, and this isn't one of those. This one, everything feels like it's important to the story and to what you're doing. That's impressive.
Yeah, I think I like this series because it's a complete package. The whole trilogy feels like a real trilogy. Like, obviously the gameplay changes in between, but the feel of the first game really links up well with the feel of the last game. It's one continuous story. The music fits the setting. The characters fit the tone. Everything looks like it was thought out and paid attention to. And not many series really get that. So I appreciate it as it's a whole thing. Like, from start to finish, it's a complete package. Where do we want the series to go? They've made some announcements. They're like, Mass Effect 4, whatever it's going to be, it's all about exploration. Like, they're really into exploring in the new one. Are we okay with that? Is there something else we want? Do we want Shepard to come back? What do you think?
I'm excited about that. If that's where they're headed, we've done the big war thing. We've had that. We've had the epic battle to save the universe. I think we could certainly go in a completely different direction and pacing. And I'm interested in the exploration. I want to find the secrets. I want to see what else the universe has to offer.
I think this game has the potential to be like Star Wars is, where the IP goes on forever, and you can have Mass Effect Pod Racer, or Mass Effect strategy game, Mass Effect Omnitool fighting, like whatever. They can go any direction, and the universe, I think, is rich enough and developed enough, and has enough solid backstory where pretty much anything could work. And BioWare and EA obviously have the money to create a good game in any direction, and they can make some kind of a Krogan football game. Anything will work, and I play all of them. I'll buy everything. So I'm down.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up then.
Well, Greg, what's your opinion on the future of the series? You didn't answer your own question.
That's true, I guess. I like the idea of the exploration. That's the thing I missed the most out of 2 and 3. I know the Mako thing was kind of a debacle in the first one, but deep down I still enjoyed it. So I would like a more refined approach to that. And I like the idea of having a Mass Effect universe where you get to play yourself. Like you start out as just like some space traveler or something, and you full character creation. A lot more like Skyrim, sort of. Like you're really just playing yourself from the start. But that's me. So next week, Dan and I are going to be
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Well, yeah, the next podcast. Dan and I are going to be doing a little golf detour. We're going to be doing, what is it? Kirby's Dream Course.
Kirby's Dream Course for the Super Nintendo.
And Tiger Woods 13, The Masters. So we're gonna spread it out a little bit. And then after that, we might be having a slight change to the podcast format, but we will give you more details about that coming up. Alex, thank you for spending like 8.5 hours with us, maybe even more, 10 hours at this point, discussing this game. I really appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can find you again.
My Twitter is Lex Krasny, and just hit me up on agreeordie.com. Everything is there.
And Alex has a weekly podcast. You can check that out. Find it on iTunes. Leave him a good review.
Good reviews only.
Good
5
reviews
stars,
only.
guys. 5 stars.
As always, I am killagreg. You can find me at killagreg17.
And I'm Dan. You can find me at the Polygon1.
You can find us at Player2, PLAYRTWO.
And you can find us at player2pressstart.com.
And don't forget to check out, we have YouTube videos now. See our beautiful, beautiful faces.
Yep.
Don't laugh, Alex. It's,
I see him all the time.
thanks, guys. We'll see you later.
Adios.
Bye.